Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. It's the 16th of August, and as always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your local weather information. You can do that very easily just by listening to your NOAA Weather Radio or your Marine Band VHF, or give us a call, 1-800-472-0391. That's the Alaska Weather Information Line, of course. You can always find us online, weather.gov/Alaska, and a little bit later this evening and overnight. If you want to check us out on YouTube, do that as well. Our links are on our website, or you can simply go to YouTube and subscribe there, so anytime there's an update, you'll have it right there on your phone when it's ready to go. Look for the channel AKwx TV. That's short for Alaska Weather TV. And join the other several hundred subscribers that are getting Alaska Weather on their phone just as soon as it's ready online. If you have a question about what you're finding and just don't like what you see, don't understand what you're looking at, or would like to see something different, whether it's on the website, on the Alaska Weather Information Line, or on this show, please let me know. I'm happy to help, and I'll certainly help you get the information that you're looking for. You can email me anytime at david.snider@noaa.gov. Here's a look at the hazardous weather situation now. For those of you watching and monitoring the water out around Tetland Road, the water is receding, so good news there, and it looks like that trend will probably take us into the weekend. All that said, it's been raining an awful lot around South Central and Southeast, and a lot more rain to come there as well. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. But for right now, the only flood advisory or official alert concern right now is for the region around the Tetland Road. Right now, there is no water on the Alaska Highway, and it's not expected to reach that. And again, the water seems to be going down, and the trend should continue. And the trend for decreasing fire danger is also continuing. In fact, by the end of the week, general fire weather forecasts will probably come to an end across all of South Central Alaska. That being said, there's still a limited fire danger around the Copper River Basin there. It looks like it's just right down in the bottom of the valley where things are the driest. But with rain moving through, of course, that trend should also be abated just a little bit more as well. So this is a look at fire danger for the 16th of August. Perhaps by the 18th or 19th of August, we won't be talking about fire danger around Alaska anymore. The visible satellite picture comes to life here, and we're starting to lose the ends of that visible scan now as we're losing our daylight in about 5-minute chunks for some parts of Alaska. Here's a look at Southeast, covered up in clouds. Here's a look at South Central, covered up in clouds. Most of the interior is covered up. There might have been some bright spots there across the Yukon Delta today and out across the west coast. There are parts of the Aleutians that got into sunshine today, so lucky you if you were in Adak or Atka and got a glimpse of the flaming ball of gas, maybe even in Shemya. Heard they saw the sun yesterday if you're out there and saw that. Visible satellite picture one more time shows that we've got some bubbling clouds here across the central and eastern parts of the interior, generally along and north of the Yukon Valley as well, where we saw more convective activity, showers, even some thunderstorms today. But pounding rain across parts of South Central this afternoon. A little bit unusual for the intensity, but not unusual for the type of weather. And then Southeast is saying, yeah, we know how to deal with this. We're back to the norm. And it looks like as we go in the next several days, there is potential for widespread amounts of 1.5 to maybe as much as 2.5 to 3 inches of rain in some parts of southeastern Alaska. So if continued and somewhat heavier rainfall is a problem for you, you'll want to monitor your weather conditions and make sure you're doing that with your friends at weather.gov/Juneau. Those will be the first places that you'll get indications of weather alerts or flooding concerns as situations are changing or perhaps improving for your area. So make sure you check that out. They've also got a highly detailed forecast for rainfall forecast for your area in Southeast on our Facebook page at facebook.com/NWS Alaska. Everybody kind of piles on there and puts the information there. Right now, Juneau has a post out that should direct you to more rainfall information there. The infrared satellite picture takes us a little bit further north, and you can see the influence of the Arctic air pouring into the Bering Sea. Notice this long trail of moisture here. This is following the jet stream as it wraps into the Gulf of Alaska. So we have several forces kind of all wrapping in on themselves right here across the 49th state, which is pretty fascinating stuff really from a weather perspective. You get the really broad southerly flow with the moisture and the subtropical connection and the very heavy rain at times across parts of Alaska. But it's getting the power, the weather punch, if you will, coming out of the Arctic. That's what's diving southward into the North Pacific and wrapping into places like Kodiak, and the overall upper level storm system that's driving every one of these surface impulses that's passing through is, again, being driven by that cold air descending southward, trying to make its way to the equator, and then because of the spin of the Earth being wrapped up in itself right here. So pretty fascinating stuff really, especially since it's all happening right over our homes this afternoon. Here's a look at the surface weather, and each one of these individual low pressure systems is capable of really driving in that occasionally heavier rainfall there. Some of that was falling over south central today. Southeast getting another band of that working into the outer coast and the inner channels, as well as one of the fronts works into western Canada. That will fall apart, but each one of these dashed lines, a trough of low pressure, is another impulse capable of spinning up into a low, and each one of these lows again helps to drive another wave of that more moderate rainfall ashore. Southwest, you've got some rain working through. Here's another one of these impulses. This one met up with some drier and more unstable air initially that allowed the sunshine to hit the ground. The sunshine warms the earth destabilizes the atmosphere. You get the moisture and the trough moving through, and you get showers and thunderstorms. That's a very basic process of how that all works, of course, but that's why we've got a little different weather across the interior, and that's why that happens in the summertime as well. Out across the west, low pressure, a more organized system already leaving the Gulf of Anadyr at 995 millibars with some warmer air on the west side of that, and then high pressure across the Aleutians at 1026 millibars, chipping away at the clouds and the stratus there, as well as the fog. So some areas generally just south of the Aleutians got into a little bit of sunshine. That center of high pressure will move a little bit further out of our weather picture here, and the fog will start to creep back in if you didn't have it already today and tonight. Rain will continue for southeast. Showers, a little bit more of a showery, light rain situation for south central. Some of the heavier stuff has moved on. And watch for some showers and thunderstorms across the upper Yukon Valley, the Yukon Flats, and northward into the Brooks Range. The pink you see should be around the Brooks Range hilltops there, as we would expect to be cold enough you might see some snow mixing in with the rainfall. That should not be as widespread, and there are no watches or warnings out for that right now. Up into the Chukchi Sea, you do see another region of rain and snow showers, and we can expect fog across the Beaufort Seacoast. As we get into Thursday, widely scattered showers and thunderstorms are expected across the central and eastern interior and down to the Alaska Range into the Talkeetnas, and maybe close enough that folks in Palmer or Chickaloon, you might hear a little bit of thunder and see a little bit of lightning during the afternoon tomorrow. A lot of that will be well off to the east and well north of the Glen Highway, I think, and then generally into the interior where we don't have as much cloud cover and have a little more heat to work with as well. Across southeast, watch for showers and periods of rainfall. Again, some of that's going to start to pick up throughout the day, and looking for totals by the end of the week and early weekend that could reach into the 1.5 to maybe even 2.5, perhaps even 3-inch range. So it's going to rain in southeast. And around St. Matthew, Nunivak Island to the Pribilofs, watch for rainfall there. Periods of rain and fog across the Seward Peninsula into Kotzebue Sound. And down south, we've got another weather disturbance trying to creep in on this ridge. That ridge will probably hold it at bay a little bit, so you'll see it moving more southward than northward. But that's right under the jet stream, and that is going to zip right across the Gulf of Alaska once again. And guess where it's headed? Our friends in southeast will get another reinforcing kind of workup of rain as that moves in through probably Friday night and into Saturday, zipping across the Gulf. In the meantime, more showers and thunderstorms for the central and eastern interior. If you could draw a line kind of right down the middle of the map here, you would have a warm and a cold side. Remember that we are under the influence of this upper level low that's right over Alaska. Here's the cold side over here, and this is where it's just going to rain and be cold and kind of dreary with low clouds and fog. But on the eastern side of this is where the warmer, wetter air is still moving from south to north, and this is where we're getting that convective weather, that bubbling up of the atmosphere. And all of that really is focused right here across the eastern interior, where we're getting just enough sunshine to make that possible. For now, not a whole lot longer though. Across southeast, upper 50s to about 60 degrees around the 3 o'clock hour today. Sitka, Juneau, the capital city, Net, Ketchikan, Hyder all in the upper 50s today. Prince William Sound temperatures in the lower 50s. Kenai about 55. Homer made it to 52. And pretty similar temperatures around the Anchorage Bowl region as well. Talkeetna was 51. 63 around Northway, and as you got up toward Fairbanks and Fort Greely, a little bit closer to 60 degrees. Fairbanks was a little cooler today. 67 for Eagle, 62 in Fort Yukon. Closer to the Arctic Village area, it was about 50 degrees. 40s and 50s for the Beaufort Seacoast, Prudhoe Bay and Dead Horse in the lower 50s this afternoon. Barrow is around 44 as you get down toward Point Hope and Point Lay. Temps are in the lower 40s there. Kotzebue Sound temps in the mid to upper 40s. A little bit closer around Kotzebue. Shishmaref was 44, near 50 in Nome today. 51 around Galena, 52 for McGrath. Russian Mission in the lower 50s. Bethel was 51. Looks like St. Paul about 54. St. George not reporting right now. Lower 50s around the Bristol Bay region with 53 in Kodiak, and lower 50s for the Alaska Peninsula with central and western Aleutians back in the mid to upper 50s for this afternoon. Overnight low temperatures will be the mildest around the upper Kuskokwim all the way through the middle Tanana valleys and the upper Yukon valleys, mid to upper 40s there. Closer to 40, even below it around Barrow and down toward Anaktuvuk Pass. 43 around Nome tonight, 44 as you get out toward Bethel, a little bit milder in Kodiak at 47. Southeast, you're looking at temperatures in the upper 40s to lower 50s. The Alaska Peninsula closer to 50 degrees around Port Hayden and Cape Sarichef region, about 50 for St. Paul and mid 40s for Adak and Atka. High temperatures tomorrow will sneak up close to about 60 degrees in Talkeetna if we can get rid of some of this rainfall. Across the middle and upper Tanana Valley, you're looking at highs in the lower to mid 60s. That could be enough to pop a few more thunderstorms in the region. Mid to upper 50s for Southeast. The North Slope, mid to upper 40s for the Chukchi Coast. Barrow about 46. As you get eastward toward the Beaufort Seacoast, lower to mid 50s may be possible there. Still on that southerly warmer flow, remember. 52 around Nome, 49 for Shishmaref, 54 in Kotzebue. Galena, you're looking at 57, about the same in McGrath. Bethel, 55 degrees, and King Salmon and Dillingham in the mid to upper 50s for your daytime tomorrow. On to flying weather now. Southeast, you're looking at a start at IFR around the Northernland Canal and some of the higher terrain. For most of the inner channels in the outer coast, MVFR will start your day out across the Copper River Basin's high terrain, IFR there. And for many of the western and northern Alaska Range passes, an IFR start, as well as parts of the Brooks Range and the eastern Beaufort Seacoast. IFR should be widespread from Nunivak Island to the Bering Sea coast of the Alaska Peninsula and out towards St. Paul and St. George. Not a lot of improvement out there, but for the west, watch for widespread MVFR through Kotzebue and Norton Sounds, and IFR dropping southward through Point Barrow, maybe as far west as Wainwright and just offshore of the Beaufort Seacoast. Convections possible in the afternoon, and look for some improvements across parts of southeast. Here's your pass conditions then. Anaktuvuk Pass and Adigan Pass looking for IFR conditions for both starts there in the morning, looking for MVFR in the afternoon. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass, we expect to see IFR to start the day. As we get into the Rainy Pass region, MVFR by the afternoon. Watch for convection around Windy Pass, MVFR conditions by the afternoon. Even more improvement possible for Isabel Pass as we get through Wednesday afternoon. Metasta Pass looks to be VFR through most of the day. Watch for showers and storms there, and in Tanita Pass with a start at MVFR for Wednesday. Porter's Pass, we expect to see marginal conditions, and for Chilkoot and White Pass, remember a start at IFR is expected for your daytime on Wednesday. Freezing levels indicates that a big surge of cold air is still holding up around the north of the Bering Strait region in the Chukchi Sea, and you can see there's a lot of warm air still remaining out across the western Bering, and the cool pool kind of sneaks its way into the Gulf, and along this boundary is where we're finding that storm track slinging in even more rain expected to head towards southeast. Icing potential is fairly limited at this point. Remember, the air is still fairly mild, but there is a lot of wet air to be used. So if you can find a cold spot, you need to be careful that could produce some light to even isolated moderate. Right now, the best chance of that's up across the northwest coast and in the vicinity of any convection, of course. But right now, the more widespread and greater threat is probably across the northwest coast, generally above 4,000 feet, maybe hit and miss out around the Pribilofs and north towards St. Matthew. The jet stream shows that slide of cold air. Look at this. It's just a slope of downward moving air across the latitudes there, 100 to 110 knots from the north and northwest, pushing that cold air closer to the Gulf of Alaska and tilting that boundary of that warm and cold that we were talking about right up and down the middle of the graphic, kind of moving a little bit this way. So that warmer air is still trying to bend back toward the Chukchi coast. As we look at 9,000 feet, you can see that trough sitting right across Kotzebue Sound. Northwesterly flow very broad across the Bering, a westerly flow across the Gulf of Alaska, and then south and westerly winds lighten up a little bit more as they move into southeast, and eastern Alaska is still on that southerly bend with 10 to 15 knots there across the central and eastern interior. A little bit more of a westerly flow across 3,000 feet. Winds are around 5 to 20 knots or so, and then out across the west, 10 to 20 knots for the Bering. A southeasterly flow here across the western chain, 30 to 35 knots, and westerlies over the Gulf, 20 to 25 coming into the heart of southeastern Alaska. What about turbulence? Pretty limited tomorrow, anywhere from Sandpoint westward toward Dutch Harbor, Unalaska, and Nikolsky below 4,000 feet. And of course, anywhere in the vicinity of ongoing convection in the afternoon. That's a look at your aviation forecast. I'll be back with the rest of your marine weather and the ice edge here in just a few minutes.
The Kositsa Bay Laboratory, which is operated by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration and the University of Alaska Fairbanks, is a unique marine research and teaching laboratory that is dedicated to excellence in marine science. The laboratory is currently involved in several research projects. One of those projects is called Hydropalooza, which has received a lot of attention on both a local and national level. Here to talk about this important project are the directors of the laboratory, Chris Holderried and David Christie. Welcome to the studio, guys.
Thanks, Jim.
What is Hydropalooza, Chris?
Well, Hydropalooza fundamentally is a 2-year seafloor coastline mapping project for Kachemak Bay. And it's providing high resolution, high spatial resolution, very detailed maps of both the sea bottom and the coastline to support a whole variety of different purposes. It basically will tell us the shape of the bay and the coast as well as what's on the bottom. But more than just mapping, it's really working with a whole variety of partners both within the state and outside the state on how do we, NOAA, get more information, better benefits about all this data that we collect primarily for navigation purposes. We do it to make nautical charts and to ensure safe navigation, but it can also be used for resource management, for local development, and for emergency response.
Why is this being done in Alaska?
Well, it's an interesting question because primarily that they're within Kachemak Bay. It was a natural place to do this because we have both the NOAA Kositsa Bay Laboratory and the Kachemak Bay National Estuarine Research Reserve. So we've got kind of the built-in partnerships and collaborations to make this work well. But also 40% of NOAA's mapping effort nationwide is actually done in Alaska. So it's a natural place to do this.
Oh, that's a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What collaborations support this project?
Well, this is one of these projects that can't be done without a lot of partners. From the national perspective, we've got 2 NOAA ships coming in, the NOAA ship Fairweather and the NOAA ship Rainier. Came in last summer in 2008, and they'll be coming back in 2009. NOAA Cessna Citation Aircraft is doing the shoreline mapping, and we're working with many offices within our Office of Coast Survey and National Geodetic Service, as well as the Coastal Ocean Science part of the National Ocean Service. Within the state, we're working with Alaska Department of Fish and Game, as well as the Kachemak Bay Research Reserve, and Department of Natural Resources, other state organizations that would be interested in this kind of information. Mm-hmm. And then locally, we're doing a lot with local marine conservation and education groups.
So who benefits from Hydropalooza?
In a general way, everybody who lives or works and plays on or around the bay benefits. At a management level, coastal planners can use the information to do a much better job of what they have to do. People who manage fisheries or manage marine navigation will benefit from having more accurate maps. And people who fish for subsistence, for sport or commercially will also benefit from having better maps to work from. From a scientific level, the mapping is just the start. It tells us the shape of the bay, so already we understand much more about the details of how the bay is constructed, and that enables us to go on, understand how the tides and currents work better on more detail, and then how those things affect plankton, crab larvae, things like that moving through the bay, how they affect the fresh water that floods into the bay from the glaciers at certain times of the year, and how sediments are redistributed around the bay.
Can you describe some of the early findings from the Hydropalooza research?
Yeah, well, the new mapping systems give us a much more high definition image than we've ever had before, so we can actually, even from the very earliest maps, we can start to see some things on the seafloor. Some of the more exciting things we've seen is right off the end of Homer Spit, there's a landslide. We don't know yet whether this is was formed during the 1964 earthquake or whether it's an active feature, but that's certainly something that we'll be wanting to look at very soon. Another interesting feature, there was a wreck discovered off the Homer Spit that was not well known before. Probably fishermen knew it was there, but we didn't. And another very interesting feature up near the head of the bay, there's an area in which there are some interesting circular structures, and these are things we call pockmarks. And the most likely thing these are is a place where something is coming out onto the seafloor. It could be groundwater, or even more interesting, it could be methane that's derived from the coal beds in the regions. And methane is very interesting because if that's the case, it will be potentially supporting some very interesting life forms around where these vents. So it's another area of interest that we'll be getting into.
Well, this has got to be so exciting for both of you. I mean, when you're seeing these things revealed to you for the first time, I mean, what's your initial reaction when you see a shipwreck and you see, you know, these different terrain features that you've never even thought were there?
Well, one of the really fun things that happens is when we put these maps out for public outreach events and things like that, and it's amazing to see who hones in on what. So the fishermen will hone in on where they see potential fishing areas in the detail. The kids honed in on things like the wreck, and we had found a 150-foot high bedrock feature that hadn't been known about before. So this 150-foot, you know, huge rock or whatever it is, we don't know yet. You know, they jumped right on things like that. So it's exciting. Geologists see one part, you know, fisheries managers see something else. It's information that everyone can use.
So Chris, what happens next?
Well, we finished up the 2008 field work and from last summer, and we'll be starting the planning for the 2009 field season. So both the two ships, Fairweather and Rainier, will be coming back, as well as our aircraft in August of 2009. Concurrently, we're processing the data from the first field season, and so the shoreline mapping data is already available online through the NOAA Coastal Services Center, and the bathymetry data, the seafloor bottom data, will be available soon. But one of the things this will also serve as is a model for how NOAA does these kind of projects nationwide. It's called Integrated Ocean and Coastal Mapping, and the basic principle is we map once, but we use the information many times for many different benefits. So we'll be providing information on that kind of process too.
Great, that's wonderful. Thank you guys for coming into the studio today and talking about this wonderful project, Hydropalooza.
Thanks for giving us the chance to talk about it.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, thanks
and
so much.
I wish you the best.
Thanks.
And thank you for joining us here in Alaska Weather Facts. Until next time.
Thanks, Jim. Here's a look at today's sea ice edge, and you'll notice there is no longer any ice in the navigational waters around Alaska. It's been that way for a little bit in the Chukchi, but we've lost that little area of brash ice just north of Prudhoe Bay and Dead Horse. So there is some higher concentration ice well north in the Beaufort Sea, but right now we're fairly close to what should be considered the sea ice minimum for this time of the year. So not a whole lot of changes coming anytime soon, but of course the ice offshore will be moving around with the recent winds. Here's a look at the winds in southeast. Generally a south and southeasterly flow across the inner channels, anywhere from 20 knots or so, with 4 to 5 foot seas across the inside. Lighter winds north of Cross Sound up toward Icy Cape, 15 knots with 7 foot seas, and south and westerlies south of Sitka to the Dixon entrance, 20 to 25 knots with 9 foot seas there. As we get into Friday, notice a little bit more of a southwesterly onshore flow south of Sitka. Still looking at a south and southeasterly wind coming up through the inner channels, 15 to 20 there, and 3 to 4 foot seas on the inside with 6 to 7 foot seas north of Cross Sound and Sitka with 15 knot winds there for Friday. For south central, generally light winds, 10 to 15 knots on the inside, 15 knots from Prince William Sound, 3 foot seas there, 6 to 7 foot seas across the north and western Gulf, and in the Shelikof Strait region, 3 foot seas with 15 knot winds coming in from the south and west. Light southwest wind on either side of the Barrens will become more southerly with time. Still light though, 3 to 5 foot seas on either side. 4 foot seas in Shelikof Strait. Light winds continue inside of Prince William Sound, and a south and southeasterly flow across the north and western Gulf. Southwesterlies in Cook Inlet up to 15 knots as we get through Friday. For Bristol Bay, 15 knots with a 6-foot sea from the south and west. Westerlies elsewhere down the Bering Sea coast and the Pacific coast, 25 to 35 knots. The highest seas not in the Pacific side this time, but in the Bering, 13-foot seas down the sea coast there as we get through Thursday. For Friday, that diminishes. Look for 8-foot seas across the Pacific. Westerlies 15 to 20 down the Bering, 6-foot seas inside of Bristol Bay. As you look at the Aleutians, look for the strongest winds and highest seas out around the central and eastern chain as we get through your Thursday afternoon. 25 to 35 knots for the Bering Sea coast, 6 to 10-foot seas across the North Pacific there with winds up to 30 knots south of Unalaska and Dutch Harbor and Nikolsky. Southwesterlies out across the western end of the chain with a 6 to 7-foot sea there. For Friday, 15 to 20 knots west of AKwx, 7 to 9-foot seas coming in for the end of the week. And then you'll notice a change in the winds here as low pressure is moving south of the chain toward the Gulf. Remember that fast moving low? That's what's changing the winds around here. So we get the southeasterly flow between Nikolsky and Atka and a northeasterly wind south of Adak and Atka. Those both up to 25 knots in that region with 10-foot seas, and lighter winds on the Bering Sea coast as you get into Friday, 15 to 20 knots there. For the west coast, it's more of that northerly colder air trying to descend south of that low pressure system. Actually, on the north side, I guess I should say. 15 knots or so with a 5 to 7-foot sea. 8-foot seas coming into the Kuskokwim Delta on a westerly wind. And westerlies for St. Paul and St. George, 14-foot seas there. 10-foot seas around St. Matthew on 15-knot winds. For Friday, northerlies continue over St. Lawrence Island, 20 knots with a 5-foot sea for Gamble and Sabunga. Southwesterlies around St. Paul and St. George, and northerlies in the Kuskokwim Delta, 15 knots with a 6-foot sea. For the North Slope, easterlies across the Beaufort, 15 knots with 3 to 4-foot seas. There, northwesterlies coming into the Chukchi Coast, 10 to 15 knots with 3 to 5-foot seas just outside of Kotzebue Sound. As we get into Friday, look for a northeasterly wind for Prudhoe Bay, a light westerly flow north of Kaktovik, light winds around Barrow, northerlies down the Chukchi Coast, and a stronger northwesterly flow pointed right into Kotzebue Sound, 20 knots with a 5-foot sea there for your Friday. Recapping tonight's weather, most places are going to be dealing with rain, especially in southeast where rainfall could pick up significantly to wrap up the week and head into the weekend. You may see as much as a ½ inch to 1 inch and maybe as much as 2.5 to 3 inches of rain across some parts of southeast. There's a lot more on Facebook and of course on weather.gov/Juneau. Across the interior, showers will continue. There might even be a clap of thunder or two across the eastern and northern interior. A better chance of that tomorrow to be a little more widespread and a little more southerly across the Alaska Range and into the Talkeetnas. Watch for rain on the west coast and rain and fog across the North Slope. More rain for southeast, of course, for Thursday and again on Friday. We'll continue the chance for showers and thunderstorms across the central, northern, and eastern interior with rainfall across south central and southwest, and conditions remain cool and dreary out across the west coast. That's your Alaska weather. Thanks for watching.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
Yoga has taught me how to be physically and emotionally on this earth.
We know now simple exercises we can